how to play Rummathon Royale.
Rummathon Royale. Okay. I think I got it. Here's how you play. At the beginning of the game, each player receives a rule card. Rule cards consist of 12 rounds. Each round consists of a sequence. Now, all rule cards are created equal, but my round 1 could be your round 7, and vice versa. Now everyone, grab your rule card and look at round 1. Notice it's talking about sets, runs, and cards of one color. What are those? So, we've created handy display cards that explain exactly what those mean. You could have sets, which are basically twins. 2 2s, 3 3s, 4 4s. You get the picture. You could have cards of one color. Now that's self-explanatory, but just make sure they're all the same color. Orange, yellow, green, blue. And finally, you can have a run. A run is just a sequence of numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or any combination of that in between. Now, before we get started with round 1, it's important to know the dealer is going to deal each player 12 cards. Your cards are going to consist of numbers between 1 and 12. Those numbers are going to have 4 different colors: orange, yellow, blue, or green. Now, some of your cards won't be numbers at all. We call those cards special action cards. There are 5 different types. There's a block card, a flex card, a bypass card, a burden card, and a sabotage card. Keep those in the back of your head. We'll explain how they're used later in the game. Round 1. Now that the dealer has dealt 12 cards to every player in the game, we must flip over the first card to initiate the discard pile. And look at that. The first card is a special action card. When this happens, which is rare, consider it a gift to player 1. Now, player 1 will begin their turn by drawing a card from the deck and placing a card from their hand into the discard pile. While player 1 is drawing a card from their deck and figuring out what to place in the discard pile, the remaining players should be organizing their hands based on runs and sets. When player 1 is finished, player 2 will then pick up a card and place 1 in the discard pile. This will continue forming the discard train. Players can only draw from the discard pile when all of the cards in their hand and all of the cards that they're picking up satisfy every requirement of that round sequence. Now, if players want to draw from the discard pile, they have to pick every card that comes before the card that they're trying to draw. For example, if I want a 7 and there are 2 2s in front of that 7, I must pick up not only the 7, but the 2 2s as well. Alrighty, it's my turn again, and I notice that that 7 will help me satisfy this round's sequence. But remember, I have to pick up the 2 cards above the 7, so I have to pick up the 7, the 2, and the 2. My round 1 sequence is 3 sets of 2 and 1 run of 4. 1 set of 2, 2 3s, 2 sets of 2, a 5, and a flex card. A flex card is a wild card. You can substitute it for any number you'd like. In this case, I'm going to substitute it for 5. 3 sets of 2, 2 11s. And last, 1 run of 4, 7, 8, 9, and 10. My sequence is complete. But wait, what do I do with these cards? Now my goal is to get rid of all of the cards in my hand. The first person to get rid of all of the cards in their hand completes that round and moves on to the next. Now, just because you've completed your sequence doesn't mean round 1 is over. In order for a round to complete, at least one player has to get rid of all of the cards in their hand. So if I were to get rid of all the cards in my hand, round 1 would be complete. Now, any player that has satisfied their sequence would move forward to round 2. Any player that is not will unfortunately remain in round 1. Now, it's important to know the first person to get rid of all of the cards in their hand gets to collect the point value of the remaining cards in the other player's hands. Let's talk about the point system. Card numbers 1 through 9 are worth 5 points. 10 through 12, 10 points. Any special action card that starts with a B, so block, burden, or bypass, 15 points. Sabotage, 20 points. And lastly, flex, 25 points. Now, there's one more way to earn points in this game, and that's with the use of the burden and the double burden card. But we'll get to that later in the game. Okay, let's rewind. So I've satisfied my sequence for round 1, but I still need to get rid of the cards in my hand before anybody else so that I get the points, right? So what are my options? Well, I can hit on my current display, or I could hit on any other player's display who satisfied their sequence also. In this case, I'm the only one, so I'm gonna hit my 6 and add it to my run. A block card can only be played when you've completed your round sequence. The first block card only applies to your sequence. The second one can be applied to anyone else's sequence. What exactly does a block card do? Let's say that I play my very first block card. This tells every player in the game that they can't play on any component of my sequence. In this case, they can't play on my run or my sets. Let's say you got lucky and you had a second block card in your hand. Now you have the option to block another player's sequence. When you block another player's sequence, this causes no other person in the game, other than the person who initiated the block, to add to that sequence. Yes, including the person who got blocked. Now that we've gone over the block card, let's go over some of the other special action cards. A Sabotage card. When a Sabotage card is played, it forces all of the other players with flex cards in their hands to discard them back into the deck. All right, everyone, give me your flex cards. So now I take those flex cards and the Sabotage card and I reshuffle it back into the deck. When you play a Sabotage card, it technically counts as your discarded card because it gets shuffled back into the deck, completing your turn. But let's say I didn't play the Sabotage. Let's say I played a Burden card. What is a Burden card? Well, a Burden card should be avoided at all costs. When one player burdens another player, it adds a responsibility to their current round. For instance, this Burden card says 1 even run of 4. So 2, 4, 6, 8, or anything of that nature. It's important to know that you can't burden a player that has already satisfied their sequence. So no one can burden me right now, but I can burden them. It's also important to know that you can fulfill your burden at any time prior to fulfilling your sequence. So if you're given this burden card with 1 even run of 4, you can put down your 1 even run of 4 and release yourself of this burden, giving you 50 extra points. Now, if the round ends, which means a player gets rid of all the cards in their hand, and you have yet to fulfill your burden or your sequence, the player who initiated the burden gets the 50 points. Double burden, double the points. That's 100 points given to you if you satisfy your burden, or 100 points given to the initiator of the burden if you fail to satisfy it. Now, there's 2 final things about a burden card that you need to know. 1, you can lay down your burden at any time in which it's fulfilled. So in this case, if someone were to get 1 even run of 4 halfway through the round, they could lay it down and get their 50 points. But if they fulfill their sequence without fulfilling their burden, they're not allowed to lay that sequence down and progress to the next round. This prevents you from moving forward unless your sequence is satisfied along with your burden. Wait, sorry, I forgot one thing. You technically can't burden a player twice in the same round. Let's be fair, y'all. The last special action card to go over is what's called the bypass card. Let's say I play a bypass card. This acts as a skip for whoever I assign it to. So if I wanted to assign the bypass to player 3, during the round, when it's their next turn, it skips them and goes to the very next player on their left. Now, as the game progresses, at any time, a player is allotted the right to say, Rummathon Royale. What does this do? Well, this indicates to the remaining players in the game that you plan on not only satisfying round 1 sequence, but also the following round sequence as well. By the time one player has gotten rid of all of the cards in their hand, you must satisfy both round 1 and round 2 sequence. If you do, you then progress to round 3. Although if you don't, you have to repeat round 1 again. The objective of this game is to be the first person to complete all 12 rounds, or have the highest points when all 12 rounds have been completed by any player in the game. There is, however, another way to win Rummathon Royale. Remember when we talked about how a player can call out Rummathon Royale when they anticipate to satisfy the next round sequence? Let's say you call out Rummathon Royale and you satisfy the next round sequence, but there's still more time in the game, and you begin to notice that you can actually satisfy a 3rd round sequence. So you call Rummathon Royale again. We call this a double Rummathon Royale. The difference between a double Rummathon Royale and a single Rummathon Royale is that the minute you satisfy all 3 sequences of your double Rummathon Royale, you become the winner of this game. So you're probably wondering, how can anyone satisfy 3 rounds worth of sequences with only 12 cards? This is where those points come into play. At the beginning of each round, you're allowed to purchase cards from the dealer. Each card is worth 10 points, and everyone's points is rounded up. So if I have 95 points, I can purchase 100 points worth of cards, or 10 cards. It's also important to know the maximum amount of cards any one person can purchase per round is 20. Now, with any game, there's gonna be mishaps. Here's how we handle mishaps in Rummathon Royale. If you mistakenly draw from the discard pile and can't play a valid round sequence, the penalty is that you're stuck repeating round 1. If you mistakenly put down the wrong sequence for your round, but no one catches it, you can still move to the next round. However, if anyone calls you out for incorrectly completing your sequence during that round, you're forced to repeat that round, while the rest of the players who did complete their sequence correctly move on to the next. Rummathon Royale has a few alternative versions. You don't have to play all 12 rounds. You can play all of the odd rounds, all of the even rounds, or the first 6. Again, the first player to complete all 12 rounds wins the game. Or, if multiple players satisfy the last round sequence, the player with the highest score wins the game. Don't forget to follow us on all social media channels at Rummathon Royale so you can stay up to date with any new game releases, such as Tally Tangle and Rebels Rumble.